All right, I think I'm live. Okay. Um, so yeah, thanks everyone for joining this emergent session. I'm hoping I can pull some folks on screen if that's okay. Maybe I can pull some people on screen and then I can say a couple things and then we can maybe chat. Does that sound good? All right, I'm gonna ask if Sofie will come up. And I know I would ideally love to have like a switch out, so like I can pop out and other people can pop in just to get like more conversation flowing. Pierre I know is here. Um, uh, Back end folks, maybe you can shoot Sofie, Pierre, Michael, Hanke messages to come up if they want. They can reject. Feel free to reject too. That's totally fine. I don't know how many people are in the audience. Oh, Alex Franco's here too. Yeah, if Alex would come up too, that'd be great. And while you're doing those invites, I'll just talk a little bit about what I was hoping that we could kind of talk about today. So. Oh, Pradeep is here. Okay, great. We have so many. This is awesome. We have so many people. So hey, Sofie.
Hey, hey.
Oh, I think I guess my headphones weren't plugged in. Now I'm hearing you. Okay. Um, so I think we hear a lot about different kinds of ways that science can be reformed, and we think a lot as a community about ways that we could be improving science. A lot of that has to do with sort of grassroots, bottom-up level changes that we make from the perspective of open science. We are changing how we're doing science, right? But there's this kind of common refrain that people are talking about over and over again, and you see it play out actually a lot in people's career trajectories that participating in open science is not really incentivized, which raises the question like, why is the current structure the one that's incentivized, and what can be done? Hey, Pierre. And what can be done to sort of address it? So obviously, this is not like academia is like a super old thing, and things that are old and traditional take time to change. But maybe coming up with a short list of best practices for how hiring, review, proposal, promotions, and tenure could better accommodate or appreciate open science practices. That could be at least a start. So that was kind of one of the things that I was hoping to get out of today. So just very briefly, I could just say like what do we think about open science? Open science is science that where the procedures and the products of that science are reproducible. They're reproducible across different labs, across samples, data collection devices, etc. They're accessible to the international community, to the public at large. They're transparent to the communities and participants involved, to other scientists, and they're inclusive to all people, both on the production side and consumption side, regardless of their gender, race, sexual orientation, religion, etc. So some of the questions that I have that I was hoping to get people to join and discuss are so one, for example, is who is currently trying to reform hiring, promotion, and tenure towards valuing open science, and what are the most common arguments against hiring, promotion, and tenure evaluation of open science contributions. So I was just doing a little bit of research just to see like what are people saying. So I've got and I can put links and stuff like that in the chat, but I've got what's the Max Planck Institute consider? Like, what are the criteria that all of these different institutes are using when they say like this is what it takes to basically get hired as a group leader or to get tenure in a group, etc. For the most part, overall, I think like the Max Planck kind of puts it in a way that kind of summarizes what everybody basically says, which is your work should be novel, and creative. It should be original. You should publish it in high impact journals. You should be internationally recognized with prizes and awards and things like that. You should graduate students. You should be getting external funding, and you should be creating technical innovations. So they're not really in many of those, in all of these different universities I was looking at, I didn't really see anywhere in there they were discussing like your work should be reproduced by other people, or the other tenets that we discuss in open science. And yeah, the question is like, there's got to be somebody out there who's trying to do that. Who and what are they doing and why? And could we maybe discuss some kind of like minimum that they could adopt, so that maybe eventually that incentive structure will start moving in the opposite direction, because it is kind of slippery slope. If we do think that open science is the future of science, once we start reforming science towards open science and the incentive structure, I have a feeling that things will continue to move in that direction. That's why I'm interested in this like minimum viable product sort of thing. Hi, Michael. Michael, I just listened to your OHBM podcast, by the way. I thought it was really great on the open data set that you've created. Yeah. So I posed that question to you guys, and if anyone else wants to come up, if back end you're sending invites and people are rejecting them, that's fine. But also, if you just let me know and I can just jump off, so I don't have to talk anymore.
Yeah, maybe because you started with Max Planck, and that's, I guess, my main employer. So maybe I can, I think the challenge is that they want, or a lot of people are searching for scientific excellence, whatever that may be, right? And that's a very difficult term, right? Because what is, do you really want to stand on top of the mountain? Because I don't know if Isaac Newton was considered that excellent when he was actually alive, right? Also things get better. Not all excellent researchers age well. And I think that is also the challenge, right? And also with the talk with Dorothy Bishop, for example, every measure that you set for measuring some form of excellence will also be used against some ethical standard by the system, right? And as soon there was also this debate about ranking openness of scientists, the wall of shame, or that's not, So I think every ranking, every search for excellence has a darker side to it, right? And I do think that Max Planck, or I don't know what they think, because it's also it has a difficult or a different structure than a university, and it's not super open in that sense. So how they hire and stuff, and I think I'm only a group leader, so I'm not tenured, and I don't know if they also don't want me to, it's not that the structures are made that way, which is not their principle. So their principle is that they're sort of a hotel for excellent researchers, whatever that may mean, that they hang out there, get good facilities, and do excellent research. And that is to the researcher, whatever they interpret as that. But for me, I'm also an egoist. So I just want to do good science and want my people to thrive in the way that I find it. So for me, open science is also a way to do this. And obviously I have some fears of it's also not that I find it easy to make good code. Not all my papers, going back to the earliest papers, my PhD, are on GitHub or are so it's also a transition that I'm making, although I have benefited from Abide and all these elements. So it's also a mixed bag. And I think that's, I'm also not an open science star in many elements, although I hope that some things that are really dear to me, I do follow up. But yeah, I think that's maybe one argument that as soon as you want to do excellence, then you get also in a tricky business, right? Because who's the best open scientist out there? I don't know. I guess it's Pierre, Michael, and Aki, or but at least I'm a woman and I'm left-handed, so I'm a little bit more open in that direction, and I have kids, so that's a bit diverse. So how do you do these rankings, right? And how do you? Yeah. So maybe I'll throw the ball now to somebody else to say meaningful stuff.
I like to follow up on that because that's also my reaction when I heard you speak, Aki, that I'd be afraid like we are creating a new rat race, which is the open science rat race. I don't really want to be part of this. However, I can say like two things. I don't know if there's an incentive for recruitment, but I can see incentive being created more structurally. So you have now grants that promote open science initiatives. That didn't exist not that long ago. Now they're in Canada, at least. I see a lot of opportunities along those lines. And second, again, going from the example of Canada, because that's what I know the most, is that they announced that by 2023, you're going to have, each institution will need a data management plan. So it's going to be mandatory. And that's going to be part of your grants. And it's becoming kind of a standard practice. So it's not going to give you an edge because you were doing it or doing it better, but at least, the community is moving and definitely you're ready for possibly doing open science, you're more ready for that. So that was the first point, kind of like more general field moving rather than specifically the hiring. The second thing is like, at least from my N=1 example, the stuff I've done in open science has proved valuable for my CV. And it's not why I did it, but I'm thinking about ADHD 200 preprocessed, which I worked on with Cameron Craddock years back. It was really because there was a competition. We wanted to facilitate people's lives. We didn't enter the competition. We shared preprocessed data. That ended up being very well used. I ended up writing a paper. It ended up being one of my most cited papers. So it's excellence, I guess. And also I am tenured for a few years, and a big part of my tenure package was letters from colleagues saying that they think I'm doing valuable science. And those are I know Ross Poldrack wrote a letter for me, and I believe Ross knows me through what I do in open science. So being invested in that gave me very traditional cred. So I don't feel like my open science investment was lost to build my career. Like, that's not why I've done any of those things, but I think they already have a value is my point. So that's it for me for now.
I added a note-taking document, so anyone feel free to just pitch in there.
I just want to echo what Pierre just said. And if there's any chance that we could avoid a openness ranking and have yet another competition in something that is ultimately at its very core characterized by the joy of collaboration, right? It would be just perverse if that is the outcome of it. And I would no longer want to be part of this. And for me, it was pretty much like Pierre, if that has any information. So N=2, everything that I was judged by was pretty much traditional scores, right? So whenever I applied somewhere, I was condensed down into a row in an Excel sheet with some numbers that are completely pointless and do not anyhow value what I think the value is of the few things of value that I did, at least from my point of view. But I was fortunate enough to see a way to tweak them in a way that they looked somewhat compatible with the existing system. And as the previous speakers have said, the system is changing. So data management plans and like everything that was exclusive open science and somewhat special is becoming standard. And everyone who's been doing it for a while is now an expert. So that's a good thing.
And yeah, maybe to add to that, like for me, these practices, or in general, being whatever it means to be open scientist, but like doing whatever it also helps me to take back control from like, I guess we all have bosses, right? But like open science is also like slightly anarchist or slightly like just taking back control over what I find important and trying to find people that I want to work with, and I like that and practices that I believe in. Like, however skeptical I am about what I'm doing, when I have the feeling I can share it, then at least I have some control over it through this, not like how to say it. It's not per se like that you have like transparency, but also that you're just open. And I think there's a difference between that and being like just clear on what you're doing, right? And not being like dependent on others. And I think that if you, yeah, maybe Pierre can continue this argument if you. But also in my PhD, maybe to finish my sentence, like it also gave me a lot of, as a PhD student, and I didn't have an easy time with my supervisor who had the control over me because I was the student, but like this open data and these projects really helped me also to get some control back. And I like control, like not too much. I'm not a control freak, but I do like to reign over my own life. And I do think that open science practices help me with that. And that's also something that, you know, I don't like to be told what to do by others. And open science is a good tool to sort of, you know, as a woman, as a mother, maybe also in science, open science helped me to connect and helped me still to be part of a community. And that's, I guess, so it also is not that noble, like why I do open science. It's just more for me, for my health, I guess. But maybe Pierre can now say something else.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
oh, don't know.
I'm sorry about that. I want to follow up on something, so I raised my hand. But
yeah,
I
always interrupt. So.
Aki's question was like, give us best practices, and I can give you one thing that I think is valuable and not necessarily related to open science particularly, which is to look at CV's kind of like 5 top contributions. And not make them necessarily papers, you know, be open at things like community building or software development or things like that. I've only chaired one recruitment committee in my life, but I've tried to steer the committee in that direction because when you have only a limited number of contributions to discuss, you can really like look what they are, what they mean, and the nature of the science. So if there are reproducibility aspects, if there are open data, then the committee has the time to actually discuss those. Well, if you really stay like an Excel spreadsheet and count, you can't. Now, in my experience giving feedback from recruitment processes, I don't, at least at UDM where I am, I don't see people count spreadsheet like Mark, but they do that a little bit when they screen 150 applications. When you go to the shortlist, typically people look at papers, they read it, they discuss the science. But I think like encouraging this and maybe just like asking top 5 to remove this temptation to just churn out stuff senselessly to max out a score, I think that would be a step for the better, for grant evaluation too, actually, not just for recruitment.
I would like to make a couple, what's the word, like provoking comments. So one is that the idea that we shouldn't create an open science competition is great. I don't want a open science H index. Totally agree. But the idea that like open science, or so rather science in general, is like fully meritocratic is like kind of, I don't think that that's true. We live in like a cult of celebrity, but now it's in the scientific world. We talk about rising stars all the time. We always are thinking about that exponential function on someone's Google Scholar page, right? Like the idea that it's the idea that people are like, it's not about H index is right. I mean, we shouldn't make science about the H index, but I don't want it. I don't want the enemy of the good to be the perfect, right? Like I don't want it to be that in order to reform science for open science, we have to reform all of science. Like we don't have to solve every single problem in science. We don't have to solve the fact that it's a publisher perish like frame of reference, etc., in order for us to get to a place in which open science related incentives appear on the hiring list. Like earlier, Sofie, you mentioned research excellence. To me, I don't know what exemplifies research excellence besides the fact that you found something, it's real enough that other people have replicated your findings. To me, that is research excellence. You actually added a page to the book of human knowledge. If you are only creating science that other people are not replicating, are you writing on the book of human knowledge, or you are writing on another book? Are you writing on the book of star science and celebrity science, which is a different book and just a different conversation altogether? And all of those comments are just meant to be provoking. They're not necessarily like 110% my viewpoint. I'm more saying them so that people will respond to that.
Well, let me respond to you, Aki. Aki and I, we should have like a monthly debate club about our like disagreements or common vision. But I also think that not replicable findings can be helpful for scientific progress, right? Because if you don't, like, I think that also like excellence in some ways is also about inspiring others to prove you wrong, right? And like, if all the science that you do is replicable, then it's also maybe too obvious, or I don't know, but I think there's also some excellence in being really terribly wrong. Like maybe not in like really like not like, I don't mean it's like in morally, like there's a clear like wrong and like things that you don't want to go, but I think that is also science is about the debate, and I think it's also about being able to make a point that gets people thinking. Like if I'm the Sofie that everybody will say, well, she's had it all wrong, but at least she got me thinking about gradients and showing that it was nonsense, then I've really achieved something because I let people think, right? And if I'm only the person that people replicate, which is also important, but it's also a different kind, you see what I mean? Like
that's not really, that's not my argument. Like you took my argument and you took it to the opposite extreme, which is like you're doing science that's so reproducible it's completely boring and that anybody can reproduce it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like, is your science reproducible or not? If it's not reproducible / not falsifiable, is it science? Is like kind of the question that I'm asking.
Well, but sometimes things are not falsifiable at the moment, but they might be in 80 years, right? So it's also like a question of perspective. Like, what is then the perspective to say, like, you see what I mean? Like, I completely agree with you, but I also think on the other hand, there is a gray, so you have to dance the gray zone, right? You cannot like, if it's, what I do think is scientific excellence is that it gets people thinking and not like, and it has to be falsifiable, and obviously it has to be, what also the comments say, they're like wiser than me at the moment, but yeah, I missed the point. Doing something that is replicable. Michael and then Pierre, take over.
Okay, let me also make maybe provocative statement. It sounds a little as if replicability should be a criterion, or a score that somebody could be judged on. I don't think that's actually practical, because we have to consider the time dimension, right? When do you think something that anybody claimed at some point is actually considered to be replicable, right? It doesn't need an n=1. It needs a bunch of replications to have any information. And from personal experience, I know that the stuff that I care about, which arguably is the most important in the world, nobody else cares about, right? At least not within the first 5 years. So we're talking about 25 years before we know that something is replicable. Everybody will have died or left or found something better to do in that time, right? So thinking about replicability should be done at the level of a field advancing as a whole and not within the scope of an individual, I think. And so a completely different dimension to think about would be, what if we switch away from the model of there is some sort of a competition of individuals where the price is that you're being awarded a chunk of money that you then can spend to build up your own kingdom where you don't have to care about anybody else. What about a different set of criteria? What kind of skills can you actually bring into a collaboration at your institution, inside a certain network? That's something completely different, and it's much more alike to a hiring that you would get to see in a company situation, right? They will acknowledge that you have written papers. They will also know how the process of writing papers look like. They will also acknowledge that a first authorship and a third authorship don't necessarily mean so much of a thing if you consider the heterogeneity across labs and And then things become totally different, right? And in the end, you will not have a chunk of money that you can spend without talking to anybody else, but you have to play in a bigger team, whatever that team is and whatever the vision of that team is, but you're just part of a bigger thing. And I think that would change the incentives quite a bit.
So following up on what both Sofie and Michael said, first, Sofie, I'm going to try to rephrase what you said, because it echoes something one of my recurring points in this conversation. In clinical trials, they've got phases. Phase 1 is basic, safety and proof of concept. Phase 2 is scaling up and establishing better effect size estimates. Phase 3, you actually validate the thing works, and you've got phase 4, you can run things with 10,000 participants, hundreds of sites. And somehow in science is like, it's unpublished, in which case, like, who knows if it's true, or it's published, and then of course it's true, it's published. Like I'm caricaturing a little bit, but for a while that was it. And I think we've got the 3 stages, and that right now the emphasis on stage 1, splashy proof of concept. And it's about, I don't know how to get this message and point across, but I think we need a little bit of stage 1, 2, and 3 research, and really value more people who do boring job of scalability, because ultimately they're the one that establish the foundation we should be building on, not the stage 1 folks. So that, yeah, Sofie, you wanted to just follow up on that?
Yeah, because I was also thinking about, like, in general, what is replicability? Because I have, like, I did a paper on personality and local brain structure, right? And I could replicate one element, but other elements not. But maybe the replication per se didn't mean much, because it was about the question. And I think that is also like what Pierre is hinting at. Like, there's so many more layers to research that even if you replicate one element, that is not always, like, it depends, like, what it means, right? And what is the general deeper, like, what is behind it? Like, and I think that open science is multi-layered, and I guess we're all open scientists here. So in one way or another, and so we all agree at some basic things that you could, like, if somebody asks you, can I see your script of your study? Like, you're not ashamed to show it, because it makes sense what you've done, right? I guess that's maybe the basic premise. But yeah, I definitely also agree with Pierre that it's also about, like, bringing it further and thinking, like, I feel sometimes that we're also a little bit in a tunnel and just repeating, like, the same ritual over and over again to search for something new, move on, and then, not deepening it out. And, like, also what Max Schein argued about theoretical neuroscience, like, first step back and think for a little bit, like, that also wouldn't hurt. Open science, and, like, to add more philosophy to the mix, or poetry. I think some people are into poetry in the chat, so that's.
But it's clear that as a field we're becoming aware of this, right? Like, there's many large-scale papers coming out, and I think as this awareness progresses, it helps the cause of hiring open scientists, because people kind of now see the difference between an N equal 20 and an N equal 10,000 people.
Hi, Pierre.
Hi, Alex.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys. Any women want to join? I can jump off.
Yes, I think
Say
that's
in the chat.
That's a great idea. Katya or Janine,
I'm a woman. I count for 2. No.
Count for. So, one thing I would like to propose actually is we stop publishing in these prestigious journals. I think some of you heard that from me in various other forums. So once we start doing that, life gets better, because we are flattening this power structure over time. I heard a lot of pushback. I'm wondering if you guys still are in the direction, I heard a lot of pushback. I'm wondering. Hi, Roberto. Are in the direction,
Somebody will say something.
I'm not to push back.
Hi, Roberto. Are in the direction.
Hello.
Hey, Roberto.
Somebody will say something.
I'm not to push back.
Oh, Roberto, maybe You have to wear headphones. Yeah, Roberto and Katja, yeah, you have like, now it's better. Thank you. No worries.
Now? Wait. Okay, now it works. So Katja's laptop is here and mine is here, so we never know which one has the microphone connected and stuff.
Now it's good. So
yeah. So I wanted to share a story. When I kind of left engineering for starting neuroscience, like the main questions I was interested at that time, it was like consciousness and like the origin of life. There was a whole debate turning. Later on, I realized around the ideas of second order cybernetics or phenomenology, stuff like that. And that's kind of what I signed for. So I started doing science because of that. And there's a lot of debate around different concepts, like the idea of the brain being a computer, or is there information in living organisms, or computation, it's a representation, an objective world, or inactivism, etc., etc., etc. And then, like, it little by little, I started or this subject of the crisis of reproducibility, or the fact that most of what we thought we knew was based on n=14 type of studies, started to become very important. And it started, like the first brain hacks were very much around those type of subjects. And then the best practices, like the extremely poor quality of our code and the way in which we collaborate, etc. And that started to take a lot of importance. And for many years, that turned to be kind of I had the impression that it took the place of what used to be my main research interest, until the point where the pandemics happened. And then, thanks to the pandemics, I started, meeting more people than before, but through Twitter mostly. And in particular, the people that are doing neuroscience and philosophy. And again, those subjects are super important. I think that for people doing neuroscience, are probably as important as the quality of our code, or if we are linting properly, or debugging it properly, or if we have continuous integration. And I fear that because of I think that both are important, and we can't leave behind the important scientific questions because of the important methodological questions. And it's a risk in our community. Very, very often when we get together, like, for example, one of the questions that the open science crowd was asking was, what's your favorite computer language? And it's fine, like, everyone has their favorite computer language. I have several favorite computer languages. But I think that those other subjects are also very important, and we need to keep them present in our discussions, without forgetting that also continuous integration is very, very important and relevant. That was the question that I like, the origin of the question that I posted. And I would love to, because like with most of you, I had discussed about coding or reproducibility or making your code re-executable, but I don't know what's your take on, is the computer like a brain or a representation and stuff?
Can I add one small thing to that? Like, I'm super thankful for Roberta and Katja, like, only hands up for their scientific views, right? Like, I really enjoy, like, I can only advertise them also as not only your fixers for doing programming stuff, but also like the insights in evolution. And I do believe that's also, like +1 for Roberto and Katja also, that through the science, you ultimately make your point, right? Because, I don't have a favorite programming language. Or maybe, I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's not interesting, that answer, but
I have one.
I assumed, but what's your favorite scientific question, Pradeep? What keeps you up at night, apart from programming?
What keeps me at night? Actually, I'm driven by helping people. I want to make life around me better. Basically, I used to do computer vision and AI back in Denmark, and then I switched to healthcare precisely because it's what you call the motivation is never ending. It's innate. I don't have to think why it's important and whatnot. So by connecting that to what keeps me at night, basically lack of prevalence of open science. I feel like a large amount of research money is being wasted just for people to build their empires. And you probably heard that from me 1,000 times on Twitter and whatnot, basically. So this is relevant to the discussion here. Is what's happening is, like I was saying, some of the policies right now are helping people who are already traditionally successful adopt open science. Basically, what's the word? Sucking off the hard work from other people, and then they build their programs better, so to say. So it's a bit of a Matthew effect getting replicated. So I support Roberto's ideas in terms of UBI and another thing he was mentioning about universal basic thing, right? I think we need to get there, right? So for programming language, it's Python. Everybody must adopt it. Yes.
No.
Yes.
No. So I think just a brief comment. I think what would be useful is to not always accent on the differences. I had one episode in my life where a person that I've worked with for quite a while, after about a year of us working together, actually literally said to me, it is such a relief how it is possible to interact with you and you not being a raging open scientist all the time. And it was completely hit me out of the blue, because
okay, just to
never perceived
clarify,
myself as such.
Taking a policy position that we should try to develop a community library in Python is not being a militant open scientist. People mistake that.
Yeah, but that's what you think.
Well, that's not a problem that they're not able to understand what I'm trying to say, so.
Yeah, but see, maybe that's why it should be better to work out where the commonalities are.
Yes.
Right. And right now you can go out on a post and say everybody should learn Python. And I did learn Python, and it's been a while, and I really like it. I don't think that Python is the solution for everyone forever. Right. So this must be a continuously reevaluated process. And what is slowly becoming the norm right now is probably already a problem at some other end, right? So if you get settled into the open science mood, right, then you're likely going to miss when it's time to move to the next better thing that will have a different name, and it's just slightly different, but will again be exaggerated on the differences to the status quo, which is not that much, to be honest. And if you really look at it.
So the one big reason why I push it is simply because open science at its core is a team science done collaboratively in a decentralized fashion. To my understanding, Python offers the best bang for the buck across various sections of what we are trying to do in neuroinformatics. Prove me wrong, right? So let's make a table on various important factors that are necessary to do this collaborative team science in a decentralized fashion across various aspects of neuroinformatics. Let's compare them factor by factor and take an overall score and see if Python would win or not. If you can prove me in that, what was the word? Specific objective manner, is just it's convenient for me, I'll continue to do that, right? We should be open to evidence. The evidence is clearly pointing towards Python. Alex, go ahead.
I hate to be the person to say this, but we're getting very much off topic here. And so the topic here is like the tenure process. So unless we're going to require people to have Python coding on your tenure review committee, I think we're getting a little bit of time. I know I agree in your points. You're very, very valid points and things like that. But the discussion here, and I just want to put in my 2 cents here, is for discussing tenure review process and how we can incorporate open science in tenure review. Okay. I hate to be the person to cut you off there.
No, it's okay. I was just answering the question.
Yeah, no, of course. I know
Yeah.
the whole team went off topic. It's not. I'm not with everyone.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I just want to put in my 2 cents here about the tenure review process and regarding open science.
Actually, I also want to note that not everybody is on tenure track, by the way. Tenure track is a highly sought after, a rare position, and it's really a pain in the neck to get it in med schools because there is a lot of politics are involved and whatnot. Many people are on research tracks, on soft money, doing a lot of things that they should not be doing too. So focus on the tenure. Like basically what we are trying to do is think about is a stable career, supported career. That's what we need to think about too,
and
right?
exactly those are the points that I want to talk about. And so the thing is, I've been talking to a lot here. I'm going to talk about US. I really don't know how the process is in Europe or things like that, but in the US, and I talk with a lot of administrators, university administrators. I really like talking to more senior people and discuss about how tenure process and stability and things like that. And when here in the US, when they're looking, universities are looking at the end administrator, he's looking at his funding. How is funding coming into the university? And then even though in the US, there's a process, you need to get students, you need to have great students, you have great publication, you do things. In the end, they're looking more on funding, okay? Funding agencies are where they're going to help you define if you're going to get tenure or not. If you get R01 in the US, or for example, in the institution that I'm working in, it's always pressure about funding. So when you get funding, you bring more students, you get more papers, it's a snowball effect. And so it's all about funding. Luckily, here in the US, at least in NIH and the grants that I've been submitting, they're now requiring you to be open. They're requiring you to share your data, and there's a process. And the thing is, being open science is expensive. And everyone knows, especially when you're sharing code or sharing data, it requires a lot of effort, because when you're sharing your data or sharing your code, it's not just throwing it up there. You're going to have people to question you about it, and you got to be constantly on top of it. And so what's interesting here in the funding agencies, actually, if you go to NIH's NDA, so it's an NIMH data archive, they even have a little table to help you budget someone to help you make your lab open science. Okay. And so it's slowly getting there. And I truly believe that this open science is going to slowly get in the tenure process. It's just going to take some time. We need to get the old school guys on top who do not believe in open science. They're all about closed data and things like that. It's going to take some 10 years, but I really think it's going to get there. Okay, those are my 2 cents. I abstain from the conversation now.
I totally agree with you that the funding bodies play a really big role because they're so important for getting tenure. I mean, it's the one thing that people really look at. And it's true that they require sharing of outputs, but I think the system of, and apologies again for this being relatively US centered, the system of study sections is outdated. And it's the same problem actually for hiring, because people are like, okay, so what brain region do you study? Or like, what type of cognition do you study? Or what disease do you study? And that's like, they want to box you in one of those 3 categories. And I think, I mean, I don't want to speak about everyone, but I think certainly for me, modern science is outside of that. You know, we do trans diagnostic, trans modality, trans, whole brain stuff. And to me, that's important. That's where the new exciting questions are. But from my end, I've struggled finding the right study section that has the right people that can appreciate that, because they're like, oh, they're all just old fashioned. So I think, and the same goes a little bit, I think, to Pradeep's point of like people with really strong open science backgrounds ending up in research track rather than tenure track. I think the same kind of boxing system that is old-fashioned and outdated happens within departments and department structures as well. So I think both within the institutions and within the funding, there has to be an updating of the infrastructure that's there for like deciding where people fit, because I think the older generations and institutions and setups don't understand where we fit in. Sofie, did you want to say something to that? Yes, I think it's partly true, and like also looking at my own like education as artificial intelligence and philosophy, like I didn't fit in a traditional department. But on the other hand, it's also about we cannot only have generalists, right? And I think we're also here together because we are interested in these topics. But I also think that specialization, and that's actually also a topic in open science, that it is okay to be really into programming, but it's also really okay to be really into statistics. Like these are all also things one has to be really good at, right? And that more team science is not about having a bunch of generalists there, but also people that can acknowledge I focus on this aspect more than I do on other stuff. And like coincidentally, maybe now there are 5 people that are like not so into focusing on one thing really much, but I do think that it also, there is some value in having a mixture. So, but I also agree with you, Janine, just as a sort of a PS from my side.
No, I totally agree with you. Thanks for bringing that up. I don't know who mentioned the team science previously. I think it might have been Michael. Because I think that even if we are a little bit more into one thing or another, our science is more and more happening, not in a vacuum in one bit, but we're working together. And so even if we are individually relatively focused, the grant proposals that we're submitting are still more integrated. And I think that's a good thing. I'm really excited about that. But I'm not sure that I haven't seen the institutions and funding agencies keep up with that as much as I would like them to.
Yeah. Experience with funding agencies and research institutions hiring you. I'm not there yet, but what I wanted to add to all this like team science aspect is the collaboration. Like for me, they I don't know if they look at my open science, how they would assess that, but I have had like throughout the last year, we started like 10 collaborative projects just because people were reaching out. They know our stuff because it's out in the open. They either want to work like on data, or they want to work with our methods, or they just want to use our tools that we built for collaboration. And so we have started like many projects, or other PIs have started many projects. One of them is Sofie. I have never been able to work with Sofie before, and this is just amazing. And it's a question that she was like interested in a structure that I'm not at all an expert in, and now I'm learning from them about the science behind and these interesting questions that they are asking, all while we are using like tools that we've been building and methods that we've been developing over the last years with Roberto. And this is just amazing. And we have several of these projects. Some are on histology, some are on MRI. So really outside of my some are outside of my comfort zone in terms of either the question or the methods or data source. And I'm learning on all ends, and that's so enriching, incredibly enriching. That's building my skill set, but also these people are so happy to have us in their projects, and that will be papers on my CV that show my collaboration. And so I guess there's another aspect that we can add to that spectrum.
So going to those aspects, I pasted it. It's kind of lost now in the chat, but there's a group in France thinking about open science. It comes from the government, and they have been doing a quite nice job. And in that document in particular, they propose the way in which different open science practices could be included in the evaluation of researchers. And what they do is they list, from the top of my head, 15 different activities, like including outreach or stuff like that, and 17 types of documents, which are not only the scientific paper, which is also, you know, the posters, the code, the data, the teaching, etc. And I think that like every time that we are, or that I have to be in a hiring committee or in an evaluation, I try to bring this up to the table. People are very open. In general, everyone is wondering. Everyone is like, open science is, you can't be against open science, at least very explicitly, but it's difficult to know how do you really integrate that. And this is very concrete. So it's a document that you can give people. It's in English, not French, luckily. And you will have this list that you can check very easily if there's evidence of open science practices in the people that you are evaluating. And collaboration is a very important one.
Yeah, the outreach is, I think, an absolutely critical aspect, and it also touches upon what Janine said. If you are open science person, your maybe even more used to the communication being a key element in projects that span institutions. And if you are like that, then you can also facilitate communication across the disciplines within an institution, and then you're an asset. And if that translates outside the boundaries of the institution or institutions into the public, then that is, in my opinion, almost as, if not even more valuable for an institution than just money rolling in, right? That just is, of course, used to pay people, but it's not prestige per se, even for the institutions.
Yeah, so glad to hear that actually France is spearheading some of these metrics to help value open science. One of the things I notice is that when we are expected to demonstrate the impact of our work based on open science, there is a cost in doing that too. It's not often enough to do something good, share it, and say, hey, it's done. I'm going to use it. We'll have to actually support it and maintain it and continuously refine it. There is a cost to that. I think those who have resources actually get a better adoption compared to those without resources, in a way. So we have to keep that in mind too, I think. So basically, point being, we need a lot more jobs in a stable manner to actually flatten the circle, as opposed to just strictly valuing parts of our open science outputs. Does that make sense?
But how do you think this can be? Because I guess we all would want more stable jobs in academia, but the question is how, or I have some ideas how, but I'm also not an expert. But Aki or Pradeep, you have an answer to this question?
Yes.
How?
Yeah.
Okay.
Redistribute wealth. UBI is there. Yeah. Essentially.
Okay. I did it. I knew that this was eventually. I knew in my head. I was like, this is eventually going to be the answer. Will eventually be communism, but I don't know how long it's going to take us to get to that.
It's not communism. It's not communism. See,
it's Python.
No. No. The thing is, basically, instead of routing all the money through few big labs, why not have a pool of common resources? Everybody collaborating on open projects. That is it. We just need to redistribute the money. Basically, postdocs getting more stable jobs early would help, goes quite a way forward in terms of improving a lot of things,
But the best way for a postdoc to have a relatively stable job is to be in a big lab that has relatively stable funding coming into it. So,
well, from what I understand, I'm just coming out of the job market, right? For people to do independent research guided by their own ideas and values, it's better for them to be in a king in hell rather than be a servant in heaven. Often we are advised not to be a cog in a big machine, but to actually develop your own machine to have this independence for your ideas, right? So I'm personally of the idea that we should not have only 3 big labs, but maybe 30 small labs. The unique philosophy of interoperable and collaborative manner rather than just concentrated wealth and resources.
I mean, that's the whole schema behind the R01, right? The idea is that it's like independent labs.
Yes.
Adina,
what do you think? You've been listening?
It was a fantastic discussion. Thank you for organizing it. I mean, I'm way too junior to think about all of these tenure criteria aspects of open science. I'm in the PhD phase of things. What I can say about open science, and that is not directly related to like tenure criteria, career decisions, and so forth, it is that open science, contributing to it, being a part of it, being a part of this great community, has certainly contributed a lot to my mental health and fun and like enthusiasm in the scientific community. And I think keeping people with a spark for science and like this maybe naive enthusiasm, but like great enthusiasm in science via movements is helpful and contributing to an overall better climate, and hopefully also like league of people that manage to get tenure. At least I hope so.
Thank you. Yeah. I think I mean I don't know if it was yesterday. I think it was yesterday. We were in the talking about like the one that Russ Polbeck was moderating, talking about the challenges and benefits of open science. And my number one benefit was that it went from being a solo sport to a team sport. You know, that was huge. I love that. Yes, Sofie.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like, if you have a lot of small teams, that's also like how to not make this a waste, right? Because in the end, bigger labs also mean like that you have a secretary that a lot of people can benefit from, or you share resources, right? And how to find the right balance between sharing resources together, yet have like smaller groups, so that not all the money is flowing into like super labs or like but I in general I agree. I don't know if like communism also had some downsides, right? Like history is also telling us so it's also like not like to look forward, like what is the real answer, right? Like I am a socialist, so I do believe in, you know, also minimum wage and all these nice things that belong to that, but like well, we don't want communism either, right? Or we want maybe an optimal communism, but that would be tricky to, you know.
I don't know. I think calling it communism sounds like a Republican talking point, in my opinion. You know, it's not communism. It's just about understanding what's the best trade-off for our goals, right? So we want independence for PIs. We want fairer evaluation. We want open science, and the best way to do that is more decentralized approach, but in a collaborative fashion. If all the data is open, if all the software is open, you just ask questions and join people in answering those questions on shared resources like HPC and whatnot. The administrative burden you're talking about is because it's a manufactured problem. You know, it's a manufactured problem because we're constantly bogged down by so many funding applications because you never had enough money and resources. You remove that problem, we don't have the administrative burden in a way, right? So this is just a dreamy idea, but I don't think it's communism. Calling it communism, I think, is just devaluing. It's
Can I just so it is a really important point, but we do have another session.
Yeah, we have to go. Yeah,
that's about to happen. I'll just say we weren't going to solve this. In this hour,
exactly.
Damn.
But I am super appreciative of all of you in the community that came out to this last minute crazy session. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of your thoughts, for your resources, for your note taking, all of that. And I'm gonna jump off, and then I'm gonna just be in the audience for the next session. See you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Aki.